Let's build culture. We build culture by what we allow. We build culture by what we promote or by what we reward.
How does culture evolve and how do we steward the culture both from the perspective of the set leader and also from the people who join the ministry in the early stages?
We don't necessarily multiply ourselves through programs. We multiply ourselves through intimacy and proximity. You cannot entrust without trusting. We are big on holiness, but we make a distinction between, say, someone fell into sin or someone is living in sin. It's a culture of grace. And a culture of grace is not necessarily a culture of a second chance, but a culture of another chance. We love your soul more than we love your...
Dear Urban Church planters, and welcome to another episode of Urban Church Talk with myself, Dr. Ndaba, and Pastor Marty.
It's your boy, Pastor Marty.
And yes, if you are new here, welcome and thank you so much for joining us. And this is a space where we talk about everything related to planting, growing, and leading thriving churches in urban spaces. And in today's episode, we are talking about one of the most important things about urban churches. And we've been saying we're going to give you an episode about culture.
Yeah.
And today, that's what we're talking about. We're talking about culture, community, and the church.
Yeah.
So, Pastor Martin, let's start there.
Yeah.
One of the things you've been saying around this whole thing is the concept of house style, and I think it kind of comes from your legal background.
Oh, yeah.
Let's unpack that so that at least we have some sort of an understanding of what we mean by this concept of culture.
Yeah.
And then we'll take it from there.
No, look, I first of all, thank you so much for the amazing feedback from our viewers. It's been absolutely amazing. We love making these episodes, and we are hearing amazing feedback about the impact. So thank you most very much, and shout out to you, the viewer. When we talk around the issue of house style, we'll use that term rather. I would say it comes back to the issue of community standards. Now, what should primarily shape your culture as a house is the word of God. That should be the primary thing. But that said, there's also how things are done in a specific community. We can call that house style. We can call that culture. And one of the things that I would like to touch on around the issue of culture is that culture is shaped by values. Dr. Miles Monroe says that a value is what you value, not what you should value, but what you actually value. It's not even a thing of like, okay, we're calling many sons to glory. It's not sloganeering. It's in real time, what is actually the thing that you prize as your most prized possession. There are quite a number of things that are said around the issue of culture. And it's often said that culture eats vision for breakfast. Culture eats strategy
Yes, I've heard
breakfast. Yeah. But here's another interesting thing about culture. Of course, it is important to be enunciated from the pulpit. But one person defined culture as that smile in the house, that everyone can smile except the person who stays in the house.
Yeah.
So oftentimes, over and above the fact that culture should be communicated, culture can be felt. Culture is what people interact with in real-time basis. Now, what I want to say is this. In terms of how we've gone about it, or how I saw it, it was this, is that culture will be obviously shaped by your values, but your values are largely shaped by who you are. For instance, we are a church that worships. Or as I like to put it, we have a strong turn-up culture. I have to take the lead in terms of worshiping. I had Bishop Musa Sono once say that the pastor is the worship leader of his church. So during worship, I take it upon myself to lose myself in worship. And I think in just how I carry myself during that particular moment, it shapes culture, because what I've begun to see is that not only am I doing that, but I'm seeing people imitate how I do it. So I would say that in as much as we say, okay, it's shaped by values, it is also shaped by what the set leader is. And of course, you can create a team around that and have cultural carriers, right? So these are people who would shadow the type of culture that you're trying to build.
Interesting. When you talk about how you have demonstrated it and led it, I'm thinking about the thematic expression is
I mean, that's the thing now,
it's
right?
become like a thing.
And it's a house style. It's a house style, yeah.
And it's very interesting that even sometimes when you go to other places, you find yourself saying the thematic expression
Exactly.
is.
And it doesn't always land when
It
we're
do-
outside.
it doesn't,
right?
it
It's a bit
doesn't.
awkward, but it's all good, yeah.
And I'm also thinking about even things like coffee,
Yes.
and how that and the urban space,
Yes.
But one of the things I want to also like talk to is the issue of intentionality.
Yes.
Why is it important for a leader to be intentional about the kind of culture that they're establishing
So
in the
here's
organization?
the interesting thing about it. You create culture intentionally, right? That's one. But also, you can create it by accident. And that is to say, you create it by what you promote, but also you create it by what you allow. So I think it's always the better option to be quite intentional in terms of what it is that you're trying to build. In terms of the culture that we wanted to build, so I said, look, the four pillars of the church, number one is courage. And courage says, do it. And then secondly, we said consistency. And that says, do it again. Let's be consistent. Number three, commitment. And that says, do it well, do it fully. And then lastly, community. And that's the whole idea of let's do it together. One of the things that I learned, probably, I'll point it out to two spaces. In the church that I grew up in, Assemblies of God, I was particularly interested or impressed by how well they did life together, particularly during times of bereavement. And I wanted that because I'm like, okay, how do we have a church that has a value add that says during your toughest of times, we will stand with you. And that is, we will show up, we'll do life together, we'll cry together. So that's something that I had to really, talk about from the pulpit, teach on. And now it's been just absolutely profound to see that people are going into it. And then the other aspect, it's really from my days at Every Nation, probably the last church I attended before I started Eternal Glory Church. There was such a strong coffee culture. And the cool thing about that is that it actually allowed for people to hang out together, talk with each other. So even when now the church started, we were like, okay, as we began to grow, let's start that coffee shop. You don't want people to leave immediately after church. One of the things that I really think it's important, particularly in this urban space, is that you don't want church to be a Sunday event. You don't want people to just do Sunday together. You want them to do life together. And that's where even issues of connect groups started coming to being. It's not necessarily like a church service. And in as much as there's a teaching element to the connect group, what you want is that you want people to be able to create tribes and camps in which they can do life together.
And we'll come back to the element of community because I
Yeah.
think it's also very important. And as you have rightly demonstrated, it's quite closely related to the culture of the
Yes,
church.
yes.
But what I also want to hear is the role that the culture that is established in the house
Yeah.
plays in terms of the growth.
Yes.
We speak about planting, growing, and leading thriving churches.
Yeah.
How does the culture contribute to the growth and the life of the church?
And funny enough, I'll probably draw from my own experience. In episode 1 and I think 2, we spoke at length around the culture of worship. One thing that I can safely say we've been very intentional about building is a worship culture.
Yeah.
And it's been a great driver of growth, right? So that is to say, we don't just have a music program, we have a worship culture. It's a huge part of what we do. Another aspect which I believe has largely contributed to our growth is a culture of initiative. A lot of our programs in this church that have, I would say, have contributed to our growth were things that were not necessarily started by me, but it was people who recognized a gap. They recognized a point of service, and they said, we're going to just go into that and then we'll grow. Another aspect, I think it's probably, it might sound like it's quite trivial, but one of the things that I really wanted to have was a fun church. I didn't want to be too formal, but whilst at the same time bringing that whole township church experience, how do you interpret it in terms of how we do church here? So number one, I wanted us to value just fun. For me, I would say that a fun space is actually even a high value. That's one of the things. Another thing that I wanted us to do, or a culture I wanted us to establish, was that I wanted us to have a culture where we receive the word of God with joy. And I tell you what, it's something that's taking time, but we are seeing we're starting to see progressive realization of that particular culture coming into being. So one of the things maybe I can say to that is that you need to be patient with your culture, right? Or in your building of that particular culture. How do you push culture? I think number one, pulpit. From the pulpit, you have to teach culture. And how do you even like come to a place where you build culture? I'll even say it's an issue of that when something is done that looks like the type of culture you are trying to build, make sure you reward it,
Yeah.
right? Because culture is built by what we allow and what we promote. So there are things that have happened in our space, and we're like, okay, this is something that we value. We'll double click on that and say, that's the way to go about it. Yeah.
It's I want to go back to what you just said about that fun culture, and I'm thinking about the 1 o'clock prayers.
Yes. Yeah. Right, I want
I
to
think
press
it really manifested there
Yeah.
in a sense that we're praying about serious things, but it was
Yes.
just like through a spirit of joy that people were going through that. I wanna understand what is going on your mind as you lead those prayers in the way that you lead
No, funny
them.
enough, I think for me, it's like there's an element of grace in the sense that I'm called for this particular generation. And there's an understanding that, okay, you are obviously quite disruptive in your concepts in terms of what it is that you are teaching. You are talking to people's sexuality, you are talking to people's finances, you are talking to the way that they live out their lives. You want to make that as palatable as possible without diluting what it is that you are saying. So the one thing that I've really just thought about is that the message we can never change,
Yeah.
but we can get creative in terms of how we present our message. I don't think I'm preaching anything particularly new to this generation, but God has given me an approach that is fun, that is humorous, but when people go into their own space, they are very much disrupted. There's a high conviction. We address everything. We address things that are quite comfortable. But when you create a fun environment, it's as if the people are under anesthetics, right? In the sense that um, they don't quite, it's a joke, but conviction is hitting. One of the things that really was just my prayer, even in terms of us when we built EGC, was that I wanted people to go back to enjoying serving God.
Yeah.
And that in itself, it's meant that we've had to have a culture of a fun culture. Another aspect I would like to touch on is this: it's a culture of grace. And a culture of grace is not necessarily a culture of a second chance, but a culture of another chance. And that is to
What's the
say,
difference between the two?
no, it means that the culture of a second chance, it means that you have another chance and then it's over. Whereas on the other side, you are willing to give people a benefit of a doubt for a lot longer. So, for instance, we are big on holiness, but we make a distinction between, say, someone fell into sin or someone is living in sin. And in moments where you have to bring about correction, by the way, when you are bringing about that correction, you are establishing culture, especially when you are consistent about it, because you are upholding a principle, but also you are showing grace when you restore that very same person who fell into sin or was living in sin. And the whole idea is this: we love your soul more than we love your gift. But in all of that, in terms of how we bring about that correction, we want it to be as gracious as possible. One of the things that the Lord said to me was that EGC was going to be a great church for the dechurched. And that is to say, a lot of people were part of a local expression, a local church before. But it could be that, they left the church during the pandemic, or they moved into this locality and they never found a church. So we've become sort of a gateway for people to be able to come back into the church. And with that, I think there's a lot of patience, because when people come back into the church, they are coming in with the various cultures from the churches that they are coming from. So we've had to be quite patient, but also obviously you push in terms of what it is that you are trying to build. Yeah.
Interesting. And now talk to me about the relationship now between the culture, which does not always necessarily reflect what the gospel is. And I think even in other churches, there's sometimes then like blurry lines between what is the gospel and what is the word and what is the house style.
Yeah.
Such that in some instances you find that the house style is what is preached more than the word.
Yeah.
And how do we avoid stepping into that kind of era while we are building culture?
I think for me, one of the things that we need to be very careful of is this: is that the house style has to emanate from the word of God. And, it's I obviously make a lot of emphasis around worship culture. I make a lot of emphasis around community. But one of the things I can really just say has been one of the marks of this local church is a culture of faith and generosity. We do things that are beyond us. And I think there is a recognition now of the fact that when we start something, we finish it. It could be that when we start out, we don't have enough resources. It could be that when we start out, we don't have whatever it is that we need to do whatever we need to do. Be it the purchase of the building, be it the purchase of a screen, be it the purchase of a sound system, or whatever the case may be. Be it an event that costs 600,000 for Easter. It will happen. And what's our approach to that? It's faith. Now, the issue of faith is something that is very much word-based. Faith comes by hearing, and hearing by the word of God. So you'll hear a lot of sermons that are preached around faith. But that same word that has been preached around faith, it's being seen in real time. So there's not even like a case of, I would say, that people are intimidated by big projects. In fact, what I've seen is that the culture, the prevailing culture, is that we get things done.
Yeah.
We finish things. So I would say that in order to avoid the nuance, make sure that the house style is very much grounded in the word of God. And I think also, let me put it this way: if you have to break down what culture is to an individual space, you'd say that a culture is an attitude. And when an attitude is held by a lot of people, it becomes a culture. So it's been quite interesting for people to understand, or rather to allow me as the set leader to become the senior and the chief cultural carrier. And then there are people who work very, very closely with me in interpreting that in the various structures of the ministry. I think it's important for me to mention something very interesting. One of the things that changed for us as Eternal Glory Church was in 2021. There is a certain gentleman by the name of Taviso Sidwell Mott. He joined Eternal Glory Church. And when he joined Eternal Glory Church, I don't understand like what was going on. The guy from day one picked up the camera.
Who picked up the camera?
He picked up the camera. He doesn't know.
Wow.
It was so funny. My boy used to like, there would be times when we have Wednesday service and he's holding on to the phone. He is singing so loud. we hear him and not the service. But let me tell you what happened. He became a senior cultural carrier in the sense that he introduced a culture of servanthood to the extent that even some of the other guys who were inside were now activated to know, okay, you need to serve like that.
Yeah.
You need to recklessly abandon yourself in serving God. And hey, even in serving the set leader.
Yeah.
And I think that's also, maybe I'm mentioning that because it is vital. It is absolutely vital that you have cultural carriers, people who will be able to take whatever it is that the set man has in mind and be able to transmit it across the organization. When people come in at a later stage, they find that there's actually a baseline of servitude. And what has happened now, you look at the culture of servitude in this church, it's absolutely amazing. This past Sunday, we had 5 services.
Sure.
7:30, 9:30, 11:30, 2 o'clock, and 6 o'clock. In all of this, people were serving with a smile on their face. They literally gave the Lord their Sunday. But I can trace it back all the way to 2021, that here in this place, we are not about positions. We are about servanthood.
Yeah. And it's I want to double click on that. What you have just given us is some sort of an example of an evolution of culture
Yes.
in EGC.
Yeah.
And I want you to speak to how culture evolves in organizations and how do we steward that evolution, because I'm thinking sometimes people who joined, for example, in the early stages of the ministry, where the pastor could meet and have coffee with everybody, you know, where he could sit after service and do all the counseling with anyone who needs to do counseling, because there's like what, maybe 15, 20, 30, 50 people. And as the ministry grows, those kinds of things kind of change because, you know, pastors are also human beings.
They're also
they have
human
their own
beings, yeah.
limitations and things like that.
Yeah.
So how does culture evolve, and how do we steward the culture, both from the perspective of the set leader and also from the people who join the ministry in the early stages?
Look, I tell you what, I think for me, for instance, I would break down the issue of church growth into multiple stages. The first barrier to break is 50. 50 is, if you're not a split, 50 is one of the most difficult numbers to break.
Sure.
And it is an important number to break because one commentator went as far as saying that 50 is the number that seems to suggest that something is happening in the room. The second number, strangely enough, is not 100, it's 200. And in that 200 mark, I will tell you that it's one of the most interesting and difficult to break. There's an interesting stat around that. They say if you don't break the 200 mark barrier in the first 4 years, chances are you are most likely not going to ever break it. Right? But with the breaking of those particular barriers, I found it quite interesting. At 50, I could still do coffees with every person that came in. At 200, I sort of could do it. And then it started getting interesting. The next number, which is 500. Oh, it got a bit too difficult. And I'll be honest with you, I did not properly steward it because I was dealing with the head of the people that left.
Yeah.
I mean, I think I mentioned it earlier that, we found ourselves in an interesting conundrum in the sense that the church was growing, but my wife and I were the ones cleaning. And again, it was Mota and another group of friends that came in and basically relieved us of the responsibility. And what it entails from a cultural standpoint is that as the organization grows, you have to abdicate certain roles and responsibilities and begin to trust a bit more. But for us, we had to undergo a process of healing. And also, like God, how do I put it? In as much as you are hurt by people, you are healed by people. We were healed by a group of people that came in and immediately said, Muruti, can we help? And with time, we had let go of the cleaning team, etc., etc. But also with all of that, there was an element of saying, okay, Martin, it's clear that you can no longer do this by yourself. And you have to undergo a process of multiplying yourself in others. And here's what I can say, Doc, around this. We don't necessarily multiply ourselves through programs. We multiply ourselves through intimacy and proximity. A story is told about how Jesus Christ chose his disciples. And the whole idea was that they might be with him. And what happens when they're with him? It's like, when you spend time with someone, you get their heart, you get their approach, and over time you start even to act like them. So that's what I can say, that we've had to have people who get close. And as they get close, you trust them with responsibility. You let go. Tough as it is, I know oftentimes for us as leaders, you're like, if you want something done, then do it yourself. Unfortunately, that's one of the ways to stop or to hinder or to impede your growth. You have to be able to abdicate. You have to be able to empower, not just give a responsibility, but give authority. That is to say, I am not in charge of this. You are in charge of this. I mean, media team, we communicate about whatever the expectations are. But in terms of how something is executed, I don't have to micromanage. Whereas probably at an earlier stage, I needed to micromanage. Yeah.
Yo, that's tough.
It is very
element
tough.
of trusting.
Yeah.
I think it's a bit of a challenge.
Yeah.
For many leaders.
And funny enough, that's the path to growth. The path to growth is trusting someone. You cannot entrust without trusting. Jesus doesn't say present in every single service across the world, but he's present through his subsidiaries. He's present through his intermediaries. And intermediaries, I'm talking about pastors, right? I'm talking, okay, not that he's present through the pastors, but he's present through the presence of the Holy Spirit. But in terms of the actual running, there are intermediaries, there are subsidiaries, there are servants of God that are leading. And what Christ has actually done there is that he has shown us his trust by entrusting us with the responsibility of running these particular houses.
Okay, let's move now to team leaders. We've been speaking about the set leaders.
Yeah.
And let's move into team leaders.
Yeah.
You were speaking about how there were people that started relieving you of the work.
Yes.
But how do we help team leaders in these growing ministries to really establish culture in the teams that they lead?
Yeah. I think for me, like again, I'm very much what's the word? I think there's a word for it. I believe in organic impartation. And the idea is, let us spend time, let us do life together, catch my cold. catch the way that I do things. One of the things that I've often tried to foster, I'm not quick to appoint leaders. I believe leaders appoint themselves. Oh, that is very risky, what I'm saying. But I say the people that gravitate towards responsibilities often become a leader of a department. And my role is simply to confirm it. So I'm confirming what is actually happening. Who is the person that best gravitates towards responsibility? And again, Doc, as I've said, my style has been very much quite organic, right? We've had minimal leadership trainings, but what God graced me with was the ability to identify the boy with the 5 loaves and the 2 fish. The leader of our transport ministry was leading before I made him leader. Cleaning team, housekeeping team as we call them, leading until I made them a leader. And the whole litmus test is who gravitates towards responsibility. In other words, who gravitates towards servanthood. The mark of leadership is servanthood. And I think in as much as you have to harness it, I think what is primary is that you have to recognize it. Even within a team of people, who is the person that tends to gravitate towards responsibility? There's a portion of scripture that I love where Paul writes to Timothy. He talks about these things: entrust to faithful man. Entrust to faithful man. Entrust these things to faithful men. And then when you are able to identify those people, you then proceed to pour into those people. And that's the same thing that happened with Jesus Christ. There were the 72, there was the 12, there was the 3, and all those people overseas, it spoke to the issue of proximity, but he was pouring into them. And I think one of the biggest mistakes we are quick to appoint people into positions that they've not grown into. You have to recognize the grace on a person and then confirm it. And once you've identified the grace on that person and confirmed it, now there's an element of training. That training could be organic. It can be something that's programmed as well.
You speak about people who gravitate towards responsibility,
Yeah.
but there is now this issue of gatekeeping.
Ooh,
Responsibility. I'm raising this because it came up at that I can conference, and I think there wasn't enough time to unpack it there. How do what's the issue, and how do leaders deal with those kinds of things? Because those who were the first to gravitate toward responsibility may end up, gatekeeping that responsibility such that other people cannot really,
And I think for me, it's a bit of a quandary, right? I'll tell you why I say that. There's a saying that goes something like, if you want something to be done, get a busy person to do it. It's like an empty restaurant. I need to see some action and all of that. So one of the things that maybe in defense of let's say some people who have been in the system is that they've proven themselves into that whole thing. But also in all of this, and I'll probably use an example of what happened here, right? It becomes imperative that there is coaching that happens. One of the things that I mentioned, even when we're still downstairs in our previous building, was that, guys, someone more talented than you is coming. Someone more anointed than you is coming. Someone more influential than you is coming. And what you have to begin to do is that you have to conscientize people of the realities that they can actually be a bottleneck that stops the growth of ministry. I'll give you a very interesting example. I use the example of Mortar. Mortar came, and at some stage, he brought his friend JB. He could have tried to gatekeep the relationship that we have, but he let him in. And look at the blessing that JB has become to the ministry. a lot of the CAF community came through him. And many of those guys obviously went on to contribute at a very, very high level. Same thing can be said in various spaces. People have had to be generous in the sense that, and strangely enough, there has to be a teaching that says, reinvent yourself within the system. That is to say, I'll give you another interesting, very interesting one. One of my closest sons is a gentleman by the name of Mukona. Mukona was our first drama. First drama.
Okay.
We opened in 2021 after the whole lockdowns, and Mukona is not around. He's still back home. I was introduced to a certain young man by the name of Ndaba. And the church is opening. I reach out to him. I'm like, can you please come and play for us? The young man plays, and my goodness, a lot of potential.
Yeah.
By the time Mukona came back, it was clear that the standard has changed.
Sure.
Mukona could have gate kept his role in the worship team. I'm the original drummer. When Muruti bought the drum, I was the first person to get this drum. But here we are. He had to find himself and say, is there not another way for me to serve within the system? Now he serves in protocol. He hardly plays. In fact, I think maybe in the pecking order of drummers, he's nowhere in terms of a person who could be playing. But he had to reinvent himself within the organization.
Let's move on now to the element of community.
Yes.
We've been talking about culture, and I've really noticed since I came to EGC,
Yeah.
the emphasis on community. You spoke earlier around issues around connect groups and the
Yeah.
role that they play. But I just want us to now go deeper into that and look at the intentionality of fostering community.
Yeah.
Because I think as the ministry grows, that kind of sense of belonging can be lost if there is no intentionality in
Yeah.
building community and ensuring that people are plugged in. How has that happened in at EGC, and why it's such an important thing for leaders to be intentional about fostering that element of community and belonging?
I tell you what, one of the things I began to see at an early stage that was somewhat of a weakness was that people were more connected to me than they were to each other. And what is essential is that not only must they be connected to the set man, they need to be connected to each other. We began to push it from the pulpit, the necessity for community. But not only that, we created avenues for people to begin to hang out together. One of the most interesting scenarios was, obviously, I studied at UCT, postgrad, UCT SCF. We had CAF. Those were people that had come in, and you could tell too much that there's two communities. I was not impressed with that. And very interesting, I proposed the following to Shezi. We need to start a hiking club. And the hiking club, here's the thing, strangely enough, what connects people is not just spirituality. It's not just a common mission. It's also common interest. So I proposed to Shezi, I'm like, Shezi, let's start a hiking club. And in this hiking club, not only will it be that we'll hike, but I'm expecting marriages to come out from this thing. And praise the Lord, a lot has happened in that space. But what actually came out of that was that a strong and budding community came. People started to interact with each other. So we created platforms for people to do life together. And then, of course, there have been connect groups where I can safely say God has done amazing things. I could make a special shout out to various connects, but let me not show favoritism. Hi, Sunny Hill. Hi, Fenya.
Wow. I think my connect group is
North Cliff is the one,
is the
right?
one.
And even in there, for me, I was like, guys, please, I don't want these spaces to be super, super, super spiritual. I want people to do life together. And with time, not only do you want people to do connect because of a locality, you want them to do it from a space of interests, common interests. You want to be seeing people attending soccer games together. You want to be seeing people attending concerts together. And I will not lie to you, it's not that we've perfected our model. There are some people who have struggled to fit in, but also at the same time, there are people who have managed to be able to get in and plug into community. And I think there's also a necessity for intentionality from someone to want to form part of community.
I think I'm one of those who um could not really have plugged in had it not been for connect group, especially myself and my wife. When
Yeah.
we came into to EGC, we had just gotten married, and
Yeah.
my wife was not part of KEF. So
Yeah.
I had relationships with the KEF people, but it was actually the connect group that really enabled us to feel like we are part of the EGC community, and then begin to serve, because there were relationships that were built from there that are still even standing in Namanje. So I think that is also a very important element of community. It's very intimate, it's very like you get to relate with people, and I think it's something that's really key.
Yeah.
And I don't know if there are other things that in at EGC have been done to foster that community and a sense of belonging.
I think for me, like as I've said, I think everything we've enunciated on in the sense that we've created platforms, but it's quite interesting because obviously an organization will take on the nature of its leader. You cannot have an organization that is, number one, not a reflection of who you are. Your organization will reflect you. Oftentimes, it will reflect your strengths, and at times, it will reflect your weaknesses. And that is why it is important to lead as a team so that your blind spots can be covered. But I think whatever it is, primarily, number one, you need to realize about building culture is that it has to emanate from you. Whatever you want to see in your organization, whatever you want to see in your church, start by doing it. Do you want a generous church? Are you generous? Do you want a prayerful church? Are you prayerful? Do you want an energetic church? Are you energetic? Do you want a church that is typified by a spirit of servanthood? Do you demonstrate servanthood? One of the interesting things that people found when they joined our ministry is that we were cleaning. I'll give you another example. A certain young lady by the name of Tokos on Demand. She joined us in 2021. She found us cleaning. She would later join the cleaning team, but she found us here. We are no longer part of cleaning team or housekeeping team, but she stayed there. And what happened? She saw us live out a particular value. One of the adages that we have in the house is this: it does not have to be your fault to be your responsibility. When you see a piece of paper, as a leader, you cannot say, or you can't say, this is not my department. No, you pick it up. And I remember this one time I picked up a piece of paper outside and I just finished preaching about or teaching around the issue of just because it's not your fault, it doesn't mean it's not your responsibility. And I'd use the same example and literally live in real time, they got to see me live out what I was teaching. So as you are trying to foster and build culture, in the words of one Mahatma Gandhi rather, be the change you want to see in the world. Be the change you want to see in your organization. Be in the forefront of whatever it is that you are championing.
On the point of community, there's something you said when you came back from the UK
Yeah.
that made me think about how the culture around first time visitors
Mm,
makes a difference. I
sure.
don't know what was your that experience,
Oh,
and
that was
how
terrible.
important is it the
No,
way
that
that
was that was so
we
terrible.
engage with our visitors.
No, man, that thing, honestly, I will not lie to you. I don't think we've perfected it,
Mm,
but I do think that that African hospitality is super, super important.
mm,
And I think, you know what? It's important to understand context. Culture has to be contextualized.
yeah, yeah,
To the best of our ability, we will say stand up. Obviously, for the introvert, it's a nightmare.
mm,
But for some people, it could communicate that I'm seen and I'm valued. So how we do it is that we ask them to stand out, we ask them to scan a QR code, and then at the end of the service, we ask them to go outside, and then we serve them juice and some scones. And then from there, during the week, someone makes a follow-up. I'm not quite certain what the conversion rate would be there. And I think there's definitely space for improvement. But I think for me, it's also quite important that, people who come in can sense that element of this is home.
yeah,
We've gone as far as saying to a second time visitor,
yeah,
you are entitled to a free cup of coffee.
yeah,
Again, what are you doing there? You are building culture by rewarding an action. So they're able to see, okay, this is something that we're looking at. We want to grow. Because one of the things we have to communicate is that we are calling many sons into glory. One of the things I used to preach about oftentimes is that I know right now you like this church because it's small, but please don't choose us because we are nice and cozy. We are on a journey of growth. We are calling many sons into
glory.
glory. So there's a responsibility on all of us to ensure that the people that are coming in, we accommodate them. One of the things I've been pushing on is that, guys, please greet.
Yeah,
Please greet someone.
and smile.
And smile, right? Like, people often hate on that whole look at your neighbor and say, we know what we are doing, okay?
Yeah, okay. I think we're approaching at the end now, but I'm thinking as someone who also like observes, other churches, and I guess amongst pastors, you have these conversations. What do you think are some of the mistakes that leaders make when it comes to establishing culture, and also when it comes to you know building that sense of community and belonging in churches?
I think number one, it's obviously not having sort of a long-term strategy around it. I think there's a necessity for patience in culture building. There's a necessity. And then also, in as much as there's a necessity for cultural carriers, as the set leader, there must be an appreciation and understanding that you are the chief cultural officer. You have to drive culture, right? And that is to say, if you want people to receive with joy, the moment you are sitting down and someone else is preaching, how are you receiving how they are preaching? Because that moment is an opportunity for you to establish culture. This is how we do it. Honor. Do you have that opportunity to show honor to someone? How do you speak about servants of the Lord? How do you honor servants of the Lord in the house? So I would say that the delegation of that chief cultural officer is quite problematic. And then lastly, it's around the issue of what values are. You need to be very honest about what it is that you value. Be very honest. Because oftentimes we'll have a list of values that we claim to value, which are not values because they're not playing out in real time. And we are saying that these are the values of the church. That's not being honest. Values must be seen. So I think there's also a necessity of saying, okay, let's maybe have an audit of what we would say we value in this house. For instance, we don't close service without making an altar call. What does that communicate? We value soul winning. Our worship, there are moments where I've broken laws in the sense that my timekeepers want me to close, but my background is worship. Our spend says it. Your values will often show in your spend. Your values will often show in your budget. Your values will show in your bank statement. So I think there's nothing of also just realizing, okay, maybe there's a last contribution. We need to understand what a value is, because a value is what shapes culture.
But how do we close that gap between what we kind of aspire to and what actually happens on the ground? As you were saying, there's sometimes that difference.
I think for me,
between what we
feedback
have
is
listening.
essential. I recently received feedback on the fact that it's not good. I don't know if I should share this on here. Our people don't greet. Oh, that was such an interesting feedback. I had to take it upon myself to say, guys, let's greet. It's at that moment, I'm rectifying a matter. It's culture, because a culture is what is happening in real time. Another thing that I can say is an issue of exposure. I think many of us don't have an opportunity to autocorrect because we don't even know what the standard is out there. You have to go into spaces where you can learn. The leaders have to be committed to a culture of learning. And that learning is not just learning through books. It's also podcasts. It's travel. It's reading of books. It's associating with mentors and senior leaders. So you bridge the gap through feedback. That feedback can be literally someone giving you feedback, or you can be exposed to something that works. And when you're exposed to it, somehow you know that in real time, in my organization, I have to bring about the change.
Okay, guys, this is the end of our episode for today. I'm sure you guys have learned quite a lot. But before I let you go, Pastor Martin, give us your parting shot. And I just want to say this, and this breaks my heart. 75% of the people who watch this podcast are not subscribed.
They're not subscribed.
75%. So please, pastoral voice, use your pastoral voice.
Come on, guys. Come on now. Please, young hater. Guys, please. Press that subscribe button. In the name. Ekameni. Kamatla. Please, guys. Please subscribe. We need you to subscribe. Please make sure that you share. We're on a road to 10,000 for now.
Yeah.
Right? 10,000 subscribers.
Parting shot?
Parting shot. Let's build culture. We build culture by what we allow. We build culture by what we promote or by what we reward. When something is against your culture, correct it. When something expresses or confirms culture, reward it. Bless you.
Thank you so much, guys, for joining us on this episode. Please subscribe, share it with somebody else. If there was anything at all that you found inspiring, encouraging, something you learned that's new, that really moved your heart, please just share it with somebody else, because somebody else would be helped by it. Until next time, keep on building, keep on leading, and keep on thriving.